Hello, welcome to the We Can Code It PreSkill Resume Workshop, where we will be spending time today creating your foundational tech resume. My name is Amanda, and on behalf of the Career Services team here at We Can Code It, we are very excited to get you started along with this journey. But please remember, as you go through this session and you begin working on your resume, you are not alone in this process. When you get to a stopping point, or maybe if you get a little bit stuck, you can always email us at careerservices@wecancodeit.org. I'll share that address with you later on in the presentation if you didn't quite get that. And we will always be available to edit your resume, help you think through some of the directives that we'll be sharing with you today. You'll have plenty of time to work on this. Please feel free to pause, rewind as we're going along. And I'm really excited to be on this part of your journey with you. So without much ado, we know that our goal today is to help you develop that foundational resume that will meet the criteria of being read by an applicant tracking system, also referred to as ATS, and can also be quickly reviewed by a hiring manager. I'll spend some time discussing possible job paths that can connect your new skills and your steps towards becoming maybe a full stack developer. If you've been in these courses and you're like, this is really exciting, I want to fulfill a new dream or a new passion I have, and we'll be right there alongside to do that with you. So all of you have just gone through PreSkill, and you may have selected different paths. Did you take 4 of our classes or a couple of our classes and are finishing up with the Career Advancement Workshop? I'm sharing this information with you here today for you to know that there are still additional courses within the PreSkill program, and to let you know that if you are thinking about continuing your education when it comes to coding and software development or web design, that we have a cachet of classes that can help you along. So please be sure to reach out to your admissions representative. Check back to our website frequently so that you can see the new and exciting programs that are coming down the pipeline for all of us. Some of you may be wondering, what are some target entry-level roles that I can be looking at utilizing these new skills that I have crafted and will continue to craft after PreSkill? Some of those roles are email marketing specialist, an entry-level web developer, webmaster, being an HTML and CSS production specialist, a technical virtual assistant. Maybe there's some freelance work that you can look for. Maybe it's a website editor, social media manager, digital marketing coordinator, content editor, digital production coordinator, website support specialist, and that HTML email developer. Now, these are just a few potential roles, and some of these roles also build upon additional skills that you may have started to craft in previous educational environments throughout the course of your career. If some of these aren't quite what you were looking for, reach out to us in Career Services, and we can spend some time helping you figure out, well, maybe what are those next steps for me? So as we dive right into things, a resume, or you might also be familiar with the term curriculum vitae or CV, is a document that's created and used by a person to present their background, their skills, and their accomplishments. Now, resumes can be used for a variety of reasons, but they're most often utilized to secure employment. A strong resume communicates your qualifications and sets you up for career success. Now, it's going to typically contain your contact information, kind of an introduction or personal statement, educational background, professional experience, and those relevant technical and interpersonal skills. Now, it does have to be eye-catching. It does have to be easy to read so that it can garner the attention of the hiring manager. Now, interesting to know, according to several studies, on average, hiring managers spent 6 seconds per resume. And these same studies found that 80% of the hiring manager's attention during this time was focused on the following: name, employer names, job titles, dates of employment, schools attended. That's a lot for 5 seconds or 6 seconds, right? Now, hiring managers are going to spend a lot of time looking at things that you cannot change. But what you can change is that information about your skills and what you've done throughout your education and work experience, including those school to job transferable skills, such as, believe it or not, perfect attendance, training, experience. Now, as I mentioned before, it does have to be applicant tracking system friendly. So on average, about 75% of resumes are read initially by a smart technology system, that ATS. So one of the things that we'll do today is make sure that we've got a format that is clean, that is concise, and we'll get through those applicant tracking systems. And now a reminder, because we're doing this in an asynchronous manner, please be sure to jot down any questions that you have as I'm chatting with you today so that I can address them via email, or we could even set up a Zoom meeting with any of our career services specialists. So let's take a moment to talk about those must-haves. Now, I promise you, there is no such thing as a perfect resume, that there are thousands of opinions on how to write a resume. Now, one of the things that everyone seems to agree upon is that the following information should be absolutely correct. Now, some will say absolutely perfect. I'm not a fan of the word perfect, so let's go with absolutely correct. So spell check will catch most of those typos, misspellings, and some grammatical errors, especially if you're using Microsoft Word or a Google Doc. There's also a free tool called Grammarly, Grammarly.com, that will do the same for both your word processing software, Word, Docs, email services. And what's really nice about Grammarly is it also helps give suggestions about tone, how you might be coming across, in addition to spelling and grammar. So it's a really nice add-in to utilize. Now, regardless of what tool you use, it's very important to have someone review that resume. That's where career services comes in. Read it aloud. Read it word for word. It will resonate very differently when you take the time to do that. Now, according to ZipRecruiter, there are some steps that you can take to get those resumes past the applicant tracking systems, utilizing standard formatting. As much as we would love to have an aesthetically pleasing resume, if you know that that application or that resume is going to go through an applicant tracking system, then we really do want to avoid fancy designs, multiple colors, charts, utilizing multiple columns or text boxes. We also want to stick with a very clean and standard margins. So no smaller than 5 inches on the top, bottom, and sides, and the font size no smaller than 11 point and no larger than 12 point for that body text. Now, headings can be a little bit larger. Bold and bullet points are okay when appropriate, but we absolutely do not want to use any headers or footers, because using a header or a footer, using a text box, utilizing columns within the document, make it very difficult for the applicant tracking system to read your information correctly. Now, a little bit about resume length. We want to stick to 1 to 2 pages so that it can be scanned quickly and that relevant information is at the forefront. Now, depending on kind of what your life background and professional background has been, um, for the most part, we're going to try really hard to stick to that 1 page. Now, there are some exceptions where they want to know everything that you've done since the moment that you were born. I joke, but it feels like that. But there are some industries that want to really see the entirety of what you've done. Those are most typically in education, higher education jobs, or government type positions. If you're unsure if the job that you're applying for fits into one of those categories, again, just reach out to us at Career Services and we'll help you navigate that. We also try to stick to the last 10 years of employment. That's really the most relevant. Now, again, we know that there are unique circumstances, and maybe some of the work you did 15 or 20 years ago is relevant to the job that you are applying for now. Again, those are things that we can help you sort out and determine, is this something that I want to include on my resume for this particular position? Um, Standard headings are something that are also really important to utilize. You want to ensure that you're using standard headings so that the ATS knows which section of the resume that it's reading. For example, your experience should be labeled as work experience or professional experience, really not anything else. It's not the time for us to get too crafty or creative. The other thing is keyword optimization. Now, this takes a little bit of time and thought, and it also means that you may need to customize your resume for the specific job that you're applying for. But your resume needs to include words that the ATS is searching for. So how do you know what words the ATS is searching for? A very good place to start is the job description itself. If the job description requests knowledge of certain languages or software, interpersonal skills, then you want to ensure that those specific words that you see in the job description are listed on your resume because the ATS may be looking for them. Keywords, using those keywords, also indicate competency in your chosen in your chosen career direction, and help you to have that resume to be ATS optimized. And that's why you must customize your resume because no two job descriptions are going to look exactly alike. And kind of a final note on the must-haves of your resume, you do want to send it in a Word doc or a PDF file. Now, most applicant tracking systems will support a PDF file, and that's what I typically recommend. But if you're unsure, reach out again to us. You can also contact the Human Resources Office of the organization that you are applying to. So let's take note about the we can code it, you can code it, yes, you can, template. So the resume writing process and advice that has been prepared by the career services team at We Can Code It is really designed to make sure that your resume has a strong chance of being parsed by an ATS and read by a human. So in your materials, you should already have received a link to the document that we'll be utilizing today. Now, I will note that, remember, this is a template. And as I'm walking through some things today, there will be some areas that are standard or some standard language that you can utilize or maybe edit to best fit your experiences and background, because it is important to customize this document. And as we talked about earlier, you have all gone through different tracks of our PreSkill program. So when you see on the document that there are projects that are listed, you'll want to make sure that you are selecting the projects that you actually completed in your course or collection of courses. If some of those projects don't look familiar to you, then don't include them. And if by chance, maybe you had a bonus project or you've got some projects that you worked on your own, those would be great to include. And again, your career services office can help you figure out a way to wordsmith them and make sure that you are best capturing that work that you did. So I'm going to take a moment to pause and give you a chance to go ahead and make sure you have that resume document pulled up so that we can go through each of those pieces of the document together. Okay, hopefully that was enough time. If not, you can continue to look for it while I'm chatting with you. Just a couple of housekeeping things that we want to be aware of as we're working on the document. In order to have access to the document, when you pull it up, please make sure that you make a copy of the document. Once you do this, that will be your version to keep, and you will be able to go ahead and make the edits and the changes on there for yourself. I also recommend retitling that document. I typically suggest first initial dot last name and then tech resume. You may want to also put a date on it for the date that you last updated it. If you end up having multiple copies of this resume, then you could utilize something like first initial last name, progressive resume, and then the date. That way it helps you keep things organized. Now, when you've finished everything on your document or just have gotten to a place where you want a little additional support, you want a career services specialist to look at it, just click that share button that is on the upper right-hand corner of that Google Doc and share it with career services at wecancodeit.org. See, I promised that I would get you that address. Write it down. Be sure to come back to this because I've already said it like at least 20 times, but we are here to help you throughout this process. So what I want us to focus on right now is getting the basics done. So in this breakout session, it's really just going to be you and me pause looking at you from the screen. But from here, we're going to just fill out that information we absolutely know. So take a few moments to get that basic information, your name, your phone number, city, state. You do not need to put your home address on here, okay? We don't do that anymore, so don't include it. Make sure you have your email address. I highly recommend linking it, including it as a hyperlink so that an individual can just click on it. If you have a LinkedIn profile, if you don't have one, that is just fine. But if you have a LinkedIn profile, include a link to that as well. Make it nice and neat, of course. Go ahead and fill in any additional education information that you have. We don't want to include high school. We're far enough removed from that as we're applying for these positions. But if you have a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, do you have some type of certification that is relevant to the position that you are applying for? You want to go ahead and include that in the relevant section on the resume. And then you'll also want to go ahead and fill out the initial information for your employment experience. So really what we're doing here, we want your role or title, the employer name or the organization name, not your supervisor name. We can code it would be what I would include on mine, right? The city and state where that organization is located and the dates of employment. So I typically suggest put like January of 2023 to present. And then for a position that you had before that, August of 2020 to January of 2023. Again, that way someone that is just glancing at it will be able to see what that work history was. Reminder, we're only going back 10 years at this point in time, so don't try to get too ahead of things. And for those of you who maybe you've come straight out of college or straight out of high school, you spent some years working, or like traveling the world or doing internships, whatever it may be, if you think you don't have relevant work experience, just reach out to us and we will help you figure out what goes in that space if you're unsure. So go ahead and at this moment, hit pause on this recording so you can go ahead and fill out this information so that when we get to the next section, you will be ready to go. Okay, so I hope everybody was able to get through that section pretty seamlessly. Now, one thing I did not mention at the start is that it's always a great idea to keep what I call your kitchen sink resume. Everything you've ever done during the entirety of your life so that you always know where it is. You're not just revamping one resume over and over again, but you've got that running document so that as you need to maybe cut and paste previous experiences or the relevant experiences that you've had for a position that you're applying for, it's always there in one document, which is really nice to have. And some of you may already have that. So hopefully if you do, that made this process that much easier for you. So we are going to talk about kind of a few different iterations of a resume. We're going to talk about the foundational resume, which is what we're mainly focusing on today, the elevated resume, and what some might consider to be the optimal resume. I have my feelings about that, but I won't go too far into that today. So what our goal though is to give you a framework that's going to work fast and it's also going to work well. So we'll spend our time working on that foundational resume, talking through the different pieces of an elevated and an optimal resume. And then we can assist you kind of one-on-one to make those changes happen. So to move from that foundational resume, you see there, they're all going to be error-free. Our bullets underneath of our employment are read more like a basic job description. The bullets might also describe your responsibilities, but our results or our accomplishments, the things that we did and did really well that someone may not realize was a function of our job, those don't tend to be included in a straight foundational resume. So to move it then to the elevated resume, this resume is designed to work well enough for most job seekers most of the time, while requiring maybe a little bit more effort than the foundational resume, still really feasible to prepare in a short amount of time. But the big difference here is that it definitely requires you to sit down and really think about what did you do at each of those previous positions and how does it relate to the job that you are applying for now. And that's where it definitely takes that brain power and can be a little bit tricky sometimes figuring out what were those accomplishments and what were the transferable skills. I always like to remind people that part of the job of our resume is to connect the dots for that recruiter or that hiring manager who may not be as well versed in our previous industries that we worked in. So as you can see there on the screen, our elevated resume is focusing more on those results from our performance. Were there major projects that you completed in that position? And bonus points if you can tie that major project to the job you're applying for now. And it's awesome if we can provide quantitative results. We know that's not always possible, but when we can, awesome. Now, the optimal resume, this is very strong, incredibly informative than the elevated resume. But it's just not really advisable for the vast majority of us. Given maybe, again, it depends on what were our backgrounds, what were our previous responsibilities and accomplishments. It can also be very industry specific. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't utilize some of those pieces from an optimal resume in our elevated or foundational resume. But it also is something that you can strive for. So as you are thinking about how you want to enhance your resume as time goes on, this is a great area to draw from. But our first goal is to get somebody to read it and highlight those critical skills that you have. So, but let me finish telling you about the optimal resume and what is different from it. So again, error-free, but the bullet sources, we are really including that best work you did there, what set you apart from any other individual in that particular position. The relevancy to the position in which you are applying must be included. And the other piece of this that becomes it's very doable, but it's challenging, is those bullet points also describe the impact of what you did, which again, very doable, but definitely takes some time to think about it. And again, connect the dots for those hiring managers. How does that work, that project, those accomplishments that you had from your previous position, how is it relevant to the position in this new industry? And the other thing about the results is that they are always provided. They're almost always going to have some type of quantitative or numerical reference to them. So they're wonderful to have, maybe a little bit of overkill, depending on the type of position that you're applying for. Alternate side of the coin might be a must-have, depending on the type of position that you are applying for. So this is probably the least amount of time that I am chatting with you in between working on our resumes. So what I want for you to do now in this next session is to go back to that resume and start completing those bullet points for your professional experience. So it might be that you're including a responsibility statement for each of your past employment experiences. If you're unsure of how to do this, or maybe you've been at the employment thing for a long time, and sometimes I forget what I did 20 years ago. So maybe it would be helpful to Google the job description for your current or previous work. Now, not just because maybe it's been a long time since you've done it and might forget some of those critical components. But what's most valuable about that is that any of those job descriptions that you're pulling up now are going to include the relevant language or titles or responsibilities that are associated with that position today. And so that's really important to make sure you have that industry-specific language. I would say too, then so Google your job description or job description for career services coach at We Can Code It. You don't have to necessarily be that specific, but job description for career services coach is what I would do. And then look at those different examples that are out there. Don't just stop at the first one you see. And go ahead and list those top 3 most important responsibilities that were related to your job and in a language that's known most by recruiters and employers. If you want a little extra credit here, or a gold star given virtually, of course, then go ahead and if you can, see how you might be able to incorporate into that description those newfound skills that you have, interpersonal skills, the things that are relevant from maybe some of the positions that you've looked at before. So I'm going to once again give you a moment to pause this recording, take as much time as you need to work on these responsibility statements. And then when you are at a stopping point for that, taken a break, gotten a snack, go ahead and return to the video so that we can work on the next section of your resume. Welcome back. Hopefully you did pause it. If you didn't pause it, that was a really kind of awkward moment while you just watched me stare, right? Just kidding. So as we continue on, congrats, you've got the structure for your foundational resume. Now what we want to do is morph that foundational resume into an elevated resume. Now, we may not be able to do this with all of the areas, but we can do it with some. And I want to start with what is an accomplishment statement? So that accomplishment statement is a description of the impact you made with the responsibilities that you had rather than just the responsibilities themselves. And this is really the key factor that kind of separates your foundational resume to the elevated resume. Responsibility statements, it's kind of like we talked about in the previous section, you're pulling those job responsibilities straight from a job description or a job posting. We see phrases that typically start with like more passive phrasing, such as responsible for or in charge of, verbs like oversaw, coordinated, assisted with, which are all excellent things to have on that foundational resume. But when we can, we want to improve upon that and really tell the story of what you have accomplished while you were in that position. Again, setting you apart from everyone else, telling that story. So instead of talking about what you were supposed to do in your position in a very general way, we're going to discuss what you actually did very specifically. So the first way to move from your foundational resume to the elevated resume is to get specific with those accomplishments. What did you do? What were the key actions that you took in that position that someone might not realize? How can you showcase those strong interpersonal skills that might be transferable or related to the position that you are applying for? If you're wondering what are interpersonal skills, things like ability to be a good problem solver, a strong team member, ability to lead within a team, things like that. Are you, is time management something that you excel at? Those are all of the types of things that we consider to be interpersonal skills. Do you work well with people? Self-management skills. How do you organize your time? Are you dependable? Those are what you want to think about there. So being very specific. And also, if you can, quantify your accomplishments and the results. So were you in a position that took your inventory loss from 20% down to 10%? That's significant. Were you able to increase customer involvement from 25% to 40%? Now, those are just a few examples. And again, if you know you've done that, but you're not sure about the specific numbers, reach out to us and we can figure out a way to help you along with that. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of those optimal resumes and the elevated resumes, because I do suspect that for many of us, we'll be able to incorporate some of those optimal resume pieces. Or I don't know about you, but I love having examples of how things work because it gets my mind going in how I might be able to utilize it myself. So that optimal resume, like we already talked about, builds upon the elevated resume, or maybe it's a piece of your resume that you can build upon. And it just clarifies, why is that work that you did so impressive? So here's what it looks like in practice. So in our foundational resume, you might list, I was responsible for a marketing budget of $500,000. That's great. That's really impressive on its own, right? Especially if you're applying for a position that is going to require dealing with a budget of a large number. But how can we make that just pop a little bit more? In an elevated resume, we're going to see much more description, analyzed advertising channels to optimally allocate $500,000 marketing budget. I don't know about you, but that certainly sounds a lot more impressive and involved than responsible for marketing budget. The only thing that is different there is they talked about, not only do they have a $500,000 marketing budget, but they talked about specifically what they did with that budget to make it most effective. Now, in an optimal resume, here's where we get really lengthy. And so you can probably see from the get-go why we don't necessarily need all of our bullet points to look like that. Otherwise, we'd have 20-page resumes. But in the optimal version, it says, optimized $500,000 marketing budget by analyzing historical returns and increasing budget to highest return channel, increasing profits by 22%. Well, dang, that is a whole lot and very different from what we saw in the foundational resume. So I don't share this example, and yes, it's a little bit of a wild example, but to kind of show you what are those differences between each of the areas and to be thinking a little bit more. How can you, again, showcase why the work you did was impressive in a way, again, that is relevant to the position that you are applying for? That's something that's really important. Now, a few moments ago, I mentioned, well, what if what I do, what if I don't do, doesn't feature any numbers? When you can, if you can, you always want to include results as a way to enhance your resume, but it doesn't mean that all of them have to be quantified numerically. So here on this slide, you can see a few other ways that you can do this. Reducing risk, improving efficiency, simplifying tasks, that's huge, increasing knowledge. Those are really powerful results that can be a stepping point for you then to describe a little bit more. And again, we talked about those self-management skills too. Which ones did you utilize to finish a project or a task or to implement something new in your organization? Getting things done on time, good attendance, being productive, being punctual. These examples are there more to get your mind going, because we would want to elaborate on these. We certainly wouldn't want to just put good attendance as a bullet point or being productive as a bullet point, but how does your productivity, your strong productivity, translate into results or efficient work, efficient project management? Those are the types of things that you want to be thinking about there. Now, in today's day and age, we do a lot of team projects, teamwork. We're very rarely working in a vacuum. So what if you have results that you want to share, but they were from an entire team and you had a small or maybe a large part of that process? So this is where you can use some of those descriptive words like contributing to, helping to, served on a team that XYZ, because it can precede any of those results that you're citing to show that you were involved, but it was part of a much larger effort. It also still implies that your efforts were instrumental in achieving that result. It is very important, and I will probably say this again, but if I don't, big, bold exclamation points and fireworks. You must be authentic on your resume and about your experiences. Do not put anything on your resume that isn't true or something that you can't stand behind and talk about. A good rule of thumb is that if you've got it on your resume or in a cover letter, which we're not talking about today, but if you do, utilize one. Don't put anything in there that you didn't do, but that you're not prepared to talk about. Be prepared to be asked a question about anything on either of those documents. So at this point in time, maybe you need a little break. Maybe you're going to come back tomorrow. Maybe you're ready to just plow through and get this done. We are going to spend some time trying to elevate that resume just a little bit more. So look at those responsibility statements that you utilized earlier and how might you change those to accomplishment statements. That's something that's really important. Also, rapport building. Anytime you are applying to a job at an organization, you always want to do your research. And in that research, you are going to recognize what they're looking for in an ideal employee. How do their values align with yours? Once you understand those types of things from the organization, can you include that in your resume in a very natural way that helps build that rapport? Now, I often get questions about additional sections on the resume, things like your self-management skills, transferable and job-related skills. And those are important to include in there, but we want to make sure that we're including them in that professional statement, which there is an example on that resume template for you to use pieces of that, but definitely customize it. You know, is there something that you feel is a really strong skill that you have that you want to talk about it? Let's absolutely do that. But where can we incorporate it in your resume in a real natural way that helps you stand out, that is relevant, and again, connects back to that job that you are applying for? Many people also ask me about things like hobbies or travel or athletic achievements. This is another one of those areas where there are thousands of opinions. And so what I would encourage you to do is think very carefully about the relevancy of those particular components of a resume. Does it make sense to include it for the organization that you are applying for? Now, I will say that my advice is to play it safe. You want to be a little bit wary of controversial topics. Some of those things to some might be politics or religious affiliations or beliefs. There's many others, but just be aware. You know, some people want to share that information, and that's great, but just always recognize that you don't know who is reading that document and you don't know how the inclusion of that information might be observed and might help or hinder your ability to move forward with that organization. So again, this is that opportunity for you to hit pause on this presentation, work on the accomplishment statements. Also, go ahead and take time to work on those excuse me, professional statement, include some of those interpersonal skills, anything that can really make you shine. So pause, come back when you're ready, and then we will finish up the last few moments of our time together today. Okay, big sigh. You've got a good resume in front of you. You're not done. Please send it to me. Send it to our career services specialist so that we can do that editing for you. Help you elevate some of that language a little bit. Look at those experiences that you've had, the responsibilities that maybe you weren't sure how to translate as an accomplishment so that we can help you there. We might even be able to pull in some of those common keywords for those positions that you're thinking about applying for. Now, I do want to share just a little bit of information about kind of the next stages of a software developer process. And so you've just completed our PreSkill program, and we also then have our ReSkill program. So you have maybe fallen in love with HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and you know just enough to be dangerous, get some awesome websites going, but now you're thinking, this is really cool and I really love it. I enjoy it. And I really think I want to go take the next step and learn more about this so that I could become a software developer or one of the hundreds of other jobs that are out there that are connected to this field. So we have multiple opportunities for individuals to participate in our ReSkill program. So you will see there, we have a full stack Java program that is 14 weeks. We have a full-time C# program, which is another coding language like Java, but different. That's also a 14-week program. Now, in both of those full-time boot camps, that is what you are doing full time. You're in school all day doing the work and really focused in on getting those skills you need. So you definitely want to be at a place where you are able to focus on that full time. Whereas we also recognize, though, that we are humans living life, and sometimes we can't stop everything around us because we still have responsibilities and significant financial obligations. So our part-time Java program allows individuals to keep working while they are pursuing their software developer skills. For more information, you can definitely visit our website, but please reach out to our amazing admissions team. Their email is really easy to remember too. It's admissions with an S at wecancodeit.org. You might be wondering, okay, this is awesome. I'm not quite sure because I don't know what types of jobs that are out there. Our ReSkill graduates move on to a wide variety of positions depending on their interests, their professional networks, location, talents. And so you can take a moment to kind of look at all of these different job titles that might be of interest to you, that our We Can Code It graduates have gone on to pursue. And let me tell you, these are only a smattering of the jobs that our graduates have moved on to. There were so many that I couldn't fit them all in one word cloud there that would still be readable. Take note of some of these and start doing your research on them. What are those positions that look most interesting to you? And then find out what do they actually do in these positions? And as a part of our PreSkill program, career services is also involved. We work with our students every week. We work diligently to connect with employer partners throughout the state of Ohio, as well as some of those organizations that are larger and that we see across the country. Here on this slide, again, you can see just a handful of those organizations that we work regularly with that have employed our graduates or also come in and spend time with our students through employer spotlights and potentially mentorship opportunities. Now, I have very much enjoyed having the opportunity to bring this information to you. And I know that this last almost hour's worth of information I've shared with you can be quite a lot. So please feel free to come back to this video at any point in time to review the material here. If you've got additional questions or you want one-on-one assistance finalizing your resume, or maybe you're at the point where you're like, Amanda, my mind is swimming. I really don't even know where to begin. We can help you with that too. So just reach out, have a conversation with us. We can meet via Zoom at a time that works best for both of our schedules. You see our contact information there again, career services at wecancodeit.org. You've got our phone number listed there, 1-844-932-2626. This will connect you to our general line so you can reach career services, you can reach admissions, you can reach financial and business services. Anyone you need to talk to is there. And if you're not sure who you need to talk to, we'll find you the right person. And then you also have our website, which I really encourage you to bookmark, visit regularly. We love to showcase the efforts and the celebrations of our students once they leave here. So if you haven't had the opportunity, take a minute to go look at some of our student profiles and learn more about what their experiences were in their PreSkill and ReSkill programs, what they went on to do, and what advice they may have for you. Again, I'm so thankful of your time, and I wish you great success as you continue on.